Welcome to the More Than Fitness podcast.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Minisode number 31 on the More Than Fitness podcast. I'm getting right into things today because it's going to be a jam-packed minisode. I'm going to try and get a lot of information in a very short period of time. And also, as you can see on the video podcast, since it's going to be about protein, I thought it would only be fitting if I showed my muscle milk that I'm drinking at this moment. Also, on the video podcast, I think I'm going to get super fancy and start adding a few pictures. So, the iMovie editing is about to take a step up. So if you haven't been watching the video minisodes on YouTube, remember, there's always a link in the description. Check that out, subscribe to it. The reason why is because a lot of things in this minisode I'm going to need pictures for. So I thought, what a better time to go ahead and start using pictures than now. So yes, my video editing skills have gone from like a 10-year-old to like a 16-year-old. Exciting times. But yeah, so today's minisode is going to be all about protein. At the moment of recording this, I don't know what the title is going to be necessarily. All I know is that there's going to be a shit ton of info in here about protein, so some of the questions that I had written down, and just a quick note on this. I actually made an article on my blog many months ago called Everything You Need to Know About Protein and Muscle Growth. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. But I'm taking a lot of the facts from that blog post, which I'll also link in the description so you can check and read through all of this, because it's going to be a lot of information. And if you don't want to write it down, understandably, or if you don't remember it, I have it all nice and neat with probably more information actually in that blog post. So some of the questions I'm going to be answering is, how much protein should you eat on a daily basis? How much protein is too much? And are high protein diets safe? What are the best sources of protein to eat regularly? Protein meal timing. So best times to eat it, how much? And can you absorb more than 30 grams per meal? The typical myth that is out there. And also at the very end, some protein hacks. 5 easy ways to consume more protein. So we're going to get pretty practical. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of shit, so I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. Let's get on the topic of how much protein should you eat on a daily basis. And again, I know you guys don't care about the physiology about this stuff, and that's why I'm leaving it to the most practical stuff of what you guys can use and take away from this. And based on the research, the optimal protein intake ranges from 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. In kilograms, this is 1.6 to 2.6 grams per pound, 1.6 to 2.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. There we go. Math is fun. But for people who are a little bit more overweight or just focusing on general health, and also those who are bulking and in a calorie surplus, you can go towards the lower end of this range. So around that 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight will be totally fine. And then so for those dieting and in a calorie deficit, you want to aim towards the higher end of that range so that you can preserve your muscle mass. And also protein is the most satiating macronutrient, so it makes you fuller than fats or carbohydrates. So to make sure that you preserve your muscle mass and your hunger isn't killing you while you're in a calorie deficit, you want to make sure that you have plenty of protein throughout the day. And how much protein you should eat, the person listening to this, is going to be relative. And with my clients, the biggest thing that I have to do is meet the client where they are. Sometimes I have people who are gung-ho. They've been eating a gram per pound of protein for the past 3 years, right? So I don't have to tell them much. But for somebody who is eating, let's say, 0.5 grams per pound. So let's say maybe they're 150 pounds and they've only been eating 50 grams of protein per day. So they're not eating a ton. For me to go ahead and say, okay, let's do a gram per pound of protein per day, and they're only doing 50 and they need to eat 3 times that, it's like that's not going to be practical for that person. So optimal, quote unquote, is relative. And a good goal for that client or that person, if you're somebody who already eats fairly low protein, just bump it up a little bit. So instead of making 50 grams the goal, let's go to like 85 grams or 90 grams of protein per day. And then whenever you can do that for at least a week or two, then you can bump it up even higher. So yeah, again, the general range for most people that's easiest to remember is just a gram per pound per body weight. But again, I think for most of my clients, 0.7 and 0.8 grams is typical for them, and they've seen great results, and that's about what I follow as well. So don't worry if you can't get in a gram per pound, and also more isn't necessarily better. I think the research has been pretty clear about that. It's not going to make a huge difference. Okay, let's go to the second question. All right, we're on a roll here. How much protein is too much? And are high protein diets safe? All right. So for the most part, the quick answer is yes, unless you have some type of kidney issues or kidney disease or other conditions that require protein restriction. Protein is 100% going to be safe for you. They actually did some really cool research of up to 2 grams per pound of body weight. So if you're 200 pounds, these people were taking in 400 grams of protein per day, and it has been shown safe via blood markers and a few other parameters as well. But yes, you can probably double the amount of protein that you're eating as long as you're a healthy individual, and you will still be 100% safe. Now, what you have to also remember, though, is if you only have 2,000 calories in the day, you're going to have a budget on how much protein you should be ingesting on a daily basis. Again, like I said in the beginning, more is not necessarily better. You're not going to get more muscle growth for eating more protein. So you don't want to make sure that you're eating so much protein that it's taking away from your carbohydrates and fats for the day, right? So again, sticking around that gram per pound, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is going to be a good move so that your other calories can come from carbohydrates and fats, which are also essential for their own reasons. So yeah, the only high protein diets are safe, but having too much protein, at some point, there's going to be some type of diminishing returns where more is actually hurting you because it's taking away from those carbs and fats. Okay, next question. See, guys, told you, going through it. What are the best sources of protein to eat regularly? All right, and this is going to be the one where I'm going to use pictures. So I'm going to do the cool little YouTube thing where you go like this, and then I'm going to have the pictures pop up right beneath me. But if you're wondering about the best sources of protein to eat, I would definitely recommend you check out either the blog post or the YouTube video of this so that you can see those pictures, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. But whenever I say best sources of protein to eat, that's going to be based off of our goals, right? So our goals for you guys listening to this is probably going to be muscle growth, fat loss, right? And so whenever that's the case, we want to, I'm going to try and keep this as simple and not as nerdy as possible. But whenever we eat protein, there's this thing inside us that happens. It's called muscle protein synthesis. And that's basically tells our body to make things, right? Or to produce muscle mass, right? It's building muscle. And the amino acid that is in protein, because proteins are made up of amino acids, okay? Still have you here. One important amino acid that is in certain proteins, high quality proteins, is leucine. And leucine has been shown whenever you get to a certain amount of leucine in a meal, you're going to fully stimulate muscle protein synthesis, right? So leucine is like the trigger for muscle growth, and you have to reach a certain amount of leucine in order to fully trigger that muscle protein synthesis. Now there is a threshold. So again, if you're trying to eat 100 grams of protein in one meal and think, oh, I'm just going to keep muscle protein synthesis skyrocketing, That's not the case. There's this threshold, and there's actually also a refractory period. So you could literally be dripping amino acids, which they've done this in studies, that you can literally drip amino acids into your bloodstream. However, there's going to be a refractory period where your body's like, no, screw you. I'm not just going to continually build muscle mass just because you're dripping amino acids into me, right? So that being said, the best sources of protein to eat are the ones with the highest amount of leucine in them. In the charts that I showed you guys, that's typically going to come from, well, the first one is going to be whey protein. So actually whey protein it's just pure protein for the most part. And that's going to be one of your highest quality sources of protein. Again, could depend on the protein powder, but for the most part, let's just say you've got a good protein powder, and whey protein is going to be the highest leucine content per gram in order to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And then after whey protein, that's whenever you have the meats, right? So you have like eggs and chicken and pork and beef, all right? And so those are all going to have, by default, naturally, high leucine content. So that's why it's harder for vegans and vegetarians to get in high quality sources of protein, because plant proteins are just, unless you combine them in certain ways where you're getting all the essential amino acids that you need, meat protein is definitely going to be the easiest route in that case. That's why vegans and vegetarians also have to eat more protein. Well, they should eat more protein if their goals, again, are to gain the most amount of muscle possible, because you're going to need to make sure that you have all those essential amino acids and that high leucine content that you're not getting because you're not eating meat. So again, check the blog post, check the video for those full lists of food sources, and that will help you out a little bit more. Okay, let's see, quick sippy sip here. Hold on, let me check the time. Let's see. All right, we're about 12 minutes in. We're good. We've only got 2 things left. Okay, protein meal timing. Best times to eat it, how much, and can you absorb more than 30 grams per meal? All right, so what I just said with the muscle protein synthesis, right? So all day long, whenever you eat food, whenever you eat protein, muscle protein synthesis goes up. But then in between meals, whenever you're not eating anything, muscle protein synthesis goes down, right? And so all it does throughout the day, so let's say you have 3 meals a day, it goes up and then down, up and then down, right? This is what muscle protein synthesis does. And I'll put a little chart right here if I haven't already done that in the pictures, in the video. Words. Yes. So it does that all day long, right? And so that means in order to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis throughout the day, you can do that about 4 to 5 times in a general waking period. And so to keep this super simple, we want to aim for at least 4 meals a day, spaced about 3 to 5 hours apart for optimal muscle growth to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. If you can't do this, I don't do this, right? Because I'm not trying to get that extra 10% growth. Like I'm not bodybuilding anymore. I don't care as much about that. However, for most of us, doing 3 meals in a shake per day isn't going to be that difficult. So that's kind of what I would recommend. And this is actually where intermittent fasting can get tricky, because most of the time you're only having 2 meals. And so sure, whenever it comes to fat loss, you're going to get the same results, because the overall amount of protein intake and the overall amount of calories that you're eating at the end of the day, that is what matters most, right? But if you're going to try and lose the most amount of body fat and retain the most amount of muscle whenever you're dieting, intermittent fasting may not be the best, because you're only stimulating muscle protein synthesis maybe twice throughout the day, as opposed to 4 or 5 times, which could be more optimal. And you could squeeze out just a little bit more progress. If you can't do this, again, making sure that you can adhere to the diet over time, that's going to be the most important. But for those who want those nitty gritty details, that's one thing you might want to reconsider with your approach for intermittent fasting. And then, can you absorb more than 30 grams per meal? Yes. To put it shortly, that is 100% a myth. Again, what I talked about with stimulating muscle protein synthesis, people just assume that, whenever I fully stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which can take, so for example, if you're eating a meat product or something like that, around 25 to 40 grams for most of you listening, that is 25 to 40 grams of protein per meal is going to be fully stimulating muscle protein synthesis. Again, how much protein you're consuming by the end of the day is most important. But in terms of muscle protein synthesis, man, you guys are going to be tired of that word by the end of this. That's going to be what it takes. But what people think is after you do that, then the rest of the amino acids, the rest of the protein just gets wasted. But what they don't realize is that the amino acids in your body, they support many other functions besides just making more tissue, besides just making more muscle. So those extra amino acids, they go and they support other functions throughout the body. Think about this from an evolutionary standpoint, think about how wasteful it would be for primitive humans because they're probably only taking in 30 to 50 grams of protein on a good day, probably not from a meat source. And it's just like, how terrible of a mechanism would that be from the body to only be able to use 30 grams of protein at one time? It's stupid whenever you take a second to actually think about it. So yes, you can absorb, quote unquote, more than 30 grams per meal. Your body actually utilizes it in different ways, right? So absorb is actually the wrong word. It's how it utilizes is more important. Okay, last thing. Yeah, we're good on time. I'm going to bust these out. Protein hacks, 5 easy ways to consume more protein. All right, first one, eat your protein first. So first in the day, so you kind of front load your protein, maybe whenever you're really hungry in the morning or something, make sure you get a big bolus of protein just to kickstart things. And then later in the day, maybe you get busy or something like that. For most of us, eating a lot of protein for dinner isn't that big of an issue, right? So making sure that you at least get a big amount at breakfast, get a big amount at dinner, maybe throw in a heavy duty shake in there with 1 or 2 scoops, you're going to be getting really close. So eat your protein first in the day, and then also in your meal. If you find yourself wasting some of your meat or protein by the end of your meal, make sure you eat it first whenever you're the hungriest, right? Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is to add a protein shake before the meal when you're cutting, because that's going to blunt your hunger a little bit. For a lot of my clients, I just tell them to have like half a protein shake before they go out to eat, so they aren't ravenously hungry and just eating everything in sight. But then whenever you're bulking, you want to add the protein shake in after your meal. I've done this many, many times, especially at nighttime. I'll have my big full meal, and then after that, I'll even throw in a shake on top of it. Because if you do it afterwards, if you did it before, it was going to blunt my hunger. But after I'm done eating the meal, even if I'm pretty full, I can chug down a shake, right? And then that gives you that little extra boost of protein that you're needing. Okay, number 3 is going to be eat your protein more frequently. You've got to think, again, back to the intermittent fasting, if you're only eating 150 grams of protein in 2 meals as opposed to 4 or 5 meals, it's simply going to be easier. So spreading up your amount of protein that you need to eat throughout the day and just eating more protein more frequently, whether it's through meals or snacks, that's going to be a good idea. Okay, number 4 is going to be have a protein shake after training and or before bed. Most of you probably already do the training one, but that can be helpful because it's super easy to down a shake after your training session. And then before bed can be really helpful for a lot of you too, because it's going to make you satiated, maybe not crave as much before bedtime, and while you're about to go to sleep. So yeah, number 4, have a protein shake after training and or before bed. And number 5, never eat a meal or snack again without it containing a high dose of protein. This has been something that's just been super easy for me as time has gone on. Whenever I got this habit down, the first thing I do whenever I think about a meal is the protein source or a snack, right? Okay, what protein source can I have with this meal or snack? And then what can I pair with that? If you can do that, then the rest of hitting your protein on a regular basis should be fairly easy. All right. And that should be it. Again, check the blog post if you want the full deets. check out the video podcast too if you want to see the visuals as I go throughout it. But that is it for Minisode number 31 on the More Than Fitness podcast. Thank you as always for listening and for watching.